today, but now we get to meet in person. Martha Foote, and as soon as Martha's done, we will open the floor to questions and answers. So please start thinking about your question now, because I'm going to ask you to line up over here, those who have questions, so we can go through them quickly and give everybody a chance to be heard before folks have to leave. Okay, Martha.
Hi, I'm just so honored to be on this panel with such great experts, and also to be with an audience who has been so patient and attentive. Thank you very much, all of you. I am from the organization Time Out from Testing, and this organization is, we're not opposed to standardized testing. What we are opposed to is the misuse of standardized testing. And there are two pieces to that we see. One is when a standardized test has a high stakes attached to it. Lainey talked about that a bit. And also when there's excessive testing. As you see in our New York City schools, we have not just the state tests, but we have interim assessments throughout the year. So kids are constantly being test prepped for the interim assessments, so that the interim assessments are the test prep for the state test. So it's just this long cycle. But to go back, what I really want to concentrate on is what are the problems with high stakes testing, and what does high stakes really mean? So basically, high stakes testing means that a single test score is used to make a high stakes decision about a child, or a teacher, or a principal, or a school. And this high stakes decision could be one of many things. It could be grade promotion. As Lainey discussed, here in New York City, you have to have a certain score on the state test to be promoted in grades 3 through 8. It can also be graduation. At the state level, students have to pass 5 Regents exams in order to graduate. If you fail one of those tests, you're not graduating. So again, they've put high stakes on the Regents exams. It could be school grade, the school progress report grades. Schools are being branded across the city with what we call the scarlet letter of A through F. It has such damaging consequences in so many ways, but just think about a child who's going to one of those schools and how that feels to them. I'm in a failing school. How does it feel to the teachers to be demoralized, feeling that they're a part of this? Aside from then the DO using these grades as an excuse then to push through school closings. And going back to what we've been hearing, so many times when they're trying to close a school, what they want to do is bring in a charter school. So this is an opportunity to push that privatization agenda. Another piece of how a high-stakes decision could be is in tenure, determining whether teachers will be granted tenure or not. Job loss. These schools are being closed. What's going to happen to these teachers? To these principals as well. Bonuses. Lainey talked about that as well. These test scores and the school progress report grades are being used to determine bonuses for teachers at a school-wide level and also for principals. They doled out over $30 million in bonuses last year based on these test scores, which we now know have been completely worthless and fraudulent. So what is going on? So, going back to about tests, just to give you just a little bit of information. No standardized test is ever a perfect measure. That's why even the testing companies, believe it or not, McGraw-Hill, they have some integrity. They'll warn, no single test should ever be used alone to make a life decision about a child. It's right out there in their material. They warn about this. However, when high stakes are placed on a test, the test, which again is never perfect, there are always going to be problems, but when you put the high stakes on it, you're going to have even more problems. And the test score is not going to reflect in any way, necessarily, except perhaps by chance, the child's achievement level. That's why we've been having this problem with what we call the test score fiasco of this year with the state tests. So why has this been happening? As we've been talking about, because there is so much pressure on principals and teachers to teach to the test. The test has these high stakes. There is so much writing on these tests. There is so much pressure then to teach to the test. So what happens is that children may become very skilled at taking that particular test, but they are not skilled at what the test is supposed to measure. For example, math or reading or writing. Excuse me. So when teachers feel pressure to teach the test, this is what's happening in the classrooms. They teach their students the kinds of problems that are found on the test, and they teach these problems over and over so the children know how to take these particular problems, but they're not being taught very much else. They spend very little time on subjects that are not tested, like science, social studies, art, music, and physical education. Now, when people say, well, we'll make this better because we'll test in more subjects, good God, what's going to happen in those subjects? They're going to be teaching to those little problems that are on the standardized test. We don't want to see that. There's no time for field trips or other enrichments, unless, of course, you're lucky enough to be in one of Eva Moskowitz's school, where she discovered that on the state tests, there were a lot of questions about farms and rural living. So what did she do? She scheduled a field trip to a farm as a mode of test prep. It wasn't about having a wonderful experience and finding out about the workings of farm and rural living. It was so that children would start to learn the vocabulary so they would be able to do better on their state tests. Look it up. It was in a New York Times article. So sad. Children don't read enough books in class. Instead, what they're reading those short passages that are found on these tests. And then they're going through and doing the multiple choice questions that are at the end of the short passages. They're not working on deep thinking in math. Instead, they're practicing the same kinds of math test questions over and over. And they are certainly not learning how to write well. You know what they're learning how to write if you have kids in these schools. They're learning how to write the 5-paragraph essay. And kids even call it that. They're not learning. It's not persuasive essays. It's not nonfiction. It's not, fiction writing. I know how to do the 5-paragraph essay. I've got my opening, so I state what it's about. I've got my 3 supporting paragraphs, and then I've got my closing. And that's what they're learning because that's what the state test demands. There's no time for children to engage in class discussions, to explore and discover new things about the world, or to work with their classmates and to work on projects. Schools need to be engaging and motivating for children. Children need to read books they enjoy. They need to grapple with challenging math problems, learn to communicate effectively, and work with their peers. They need to engage in science, social studies, music, and art, take field trips, and develop a capacity to think deeply. Unfortunately, this cannot happen within a high-stakes testing environment. And I am telling all of you, this is not going to happen until we get rid of the high stakes on these tests. Instead, what has happened and what will continue is that the test has become the curriculum. So what I'm saying to you is a test, a standardized test, can give you some information, but it cannot give you all the information you need to use. And what you need to do in order for that information to be used effectively and for greater understanding is it needs to be used in concert with multiple measures. You cannot have the test alone. You need to have it in concert with teacher observation, classroom work, school assessments, project work, homework, all of these things put together so that you've got a rich portfolio of what your child is doing and what he or she is capable of and what he or she has accomplished. There's something very seductive about a single quantitative test score. And unfortunately, that has captured the imagination of many. Even when you rationally understand and believe what I'm saying to you, so many people go back and say, but what was my child's score? What was that? They want to go on to ERIS and find out what was the score. Unfortunately, we have put so much emphasis on these tests and on these test scores, and they are used in so many ways to make these high-stakes decisions about our children, about our school.